Hello and welcome back to What's on My Mind show. My name is Thomas for What's on My Mind, and today's gonna be interesting because as a recording of this video, the world is going crazy. According to the New York Times, and this is a direct quote from a New York Times article, President Trump on Thursday announced he was erasing the scientific finding that climate change endangers human health and the environment, ending the federal government's legal authority to control the pollution that is dangerously heating the planet. The action is a key step in removing limits on carbon dioxide, methane, and four other greenhouse gases that scientists say are supercharging heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and other extreme weather. Led by a president who refers to climate change as a hoax, the administration is essentially saying that the vast majority of scientists around the world are wrong, and a hotter planet is not the menace that decades of research show it to be. In a rejection of fact that has been accepted for decades by presidents of both parties, including Richard Nixon, his top advisor warned of the dangers of climate change, and George the first President George Bush, who signed an international climate treaty. It is a knockout punch to the years-long fight by a small group of conservative activists as well as oil, gas, and coal interests to stop the country from transitioning away from fossil fuels towards solar, wind, and other non-polluting energy. This is about as big as it gets, President Trump said at the White House, as a smiling Lee Zeldin, the administrator of the EPA, stood by. We are officially terminating the so-called endangerment finding and disastrous Obama-era policy. Mr. Trump called it a radical rule and became the basis for the Green New Scam, a label the president gives to any effort to curb emissions or develop renewable energy. Mr. Zeldin called it the single largest deregulatory action in the history of the United States. He accused Democrats of having launched an ideological crusade on climate change that strangled entire sectors of the United States economy, particularly the auto industry. The administration said it would save auto manufacturers and other businesses an estimated $1 trillion, though it has declined to explain how it arrived at that estimate. An issue An issue is what's known as the endangerment finding, a 2009 scientific conclusion that greenhouse gas emissions pose a danger to Americans' health and welfare. The finding was based on more than 200 pages of research and evidence. Mr. Trump, who has called climate scientists stupid people, claimed on Tuesday that the finding had no basis in fact. For nearly 17 years, the EPA relied on the bedrock finding to justify regulations that limit carbon dioxide, methane, and other pollution from oil and gas wells, tailpipes, smokestacks, and other sources that burn fossil fuels. The repeal of the endangerment finding is expected to increase the country's greenhouse gas emissions by 10% over the next 30 years, according to the Environmental Defense Fund and advocacy group. The added pollution could lead to as many as 58,000 premature deaths and an increase of 37 million asthma attacks between now and 2055. But on Fox Business on Wednesday, Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary, revived a debunked myth of how Trump administration views carbon dioxide, the main greenhouse gas. CO2 was never a pollutant. When we breathe, we emit CO2. Plants need CO2 to survive and grow. They thrive with more CO2. While carbon dioxide can help plants grow, the extraordinarily high levels in the atmosphere are overwhelming natural processes, increasing the frequency and severity of droughts, heat waves, and other damaging events, according to scientists. Former President Barack Obama wrote on social media that the repeal of the endangerment finding means we'll be less safe, less healthy, and less able to fight climate change. Also, the fossil fuel industry can make even more money. Governor Gavin Newsom of California promised a court challenge if despite those decisions survives legal challenges. It will lead to more deadly wildfires, more extreme heat deaths, more climate-driven floods and droughts, and greater threats to communities nationwide, he said. California, quote, will sue to challenge this illegal action, end quote, and will continue to regulate greenhouse gases, he said. We'll see them in court and we will win, said Manish Bapna, the president of the Natural Resources Defense Council. The science and law are crystal clear. The EPA is issuing a rushed, sloppy, and unscientific determination that has no legal basis. In revoking the endangerment finding, the Trump administration made the legal argument that the Clean Air Act allows the government to limit only pollution that causes direct harm to Americans, and only in cases where the damage is near the source of the pollution. Greenhouse gases, however, collect in the atmosphere where they form a kind of blanket around the Earth, trapping heat from the sun. This altering the Earth's climate and intensifying heat waves, droughts, hurricanes, and floods, while also melting glaciers, causing sea levels to rise. The planet has warmed on average about 1.4 degrees Celsius or 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit since the industrial age, according to Europe's Copernicus Climate Change Service. The action announced on Thursday eliminates limits on greenhouse gas produced by motor vehicles. Transportation is the single largest source of greenhouse gases in the United States. The Biden administration has sought to tighten limits on tailpipe emissions to encourage automakers to sell more non-polluting electric vehicles. Restrictions on other pollutants from automobiles, such as nitrogen oxides and benzene, are still in place. Getting rid of the endangerment finding clears the way for the EPA to repeal limits on greenhouse gases from stationary sources of pollution, such as power plants and oil and gas wells, a process that it has begun. The United States is currently the world's second largest climate polluter after China, but as the nation that has pumped the most greenhouse gases into the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution, the distinction matters because past emissions of long-lived greenhouse gases significantly contribute to current warming. Numerous greenhouse gas, numerous rigorous scientific findings since 2009 have shown that greenhouse gases and global warming are harming public health and directly causing deaths. Current research has found that if the planet continues to warm at its current rate, exposure to wildfire smoke would kill an estimated 70,000 Americans each year by 2050. Just one example of the health dangers posed by a heating planet. Another study found that the deaths from extreme heat in the United States have more than doubled in recent decades. As the weather globally gets warmer and wetter, diseases spreading. Last year, 49,000 travelers from the United 49 4,947 travelers from the United States contracted dengue, a mosquito-borne disease prevalent in tropical and subtropical climates while abroad. A 30% increase over the previous year, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Under the 2015 Paris Agreement, nearly all nations agreed to try to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels. That goal has been seen as crucial to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Scientists now expect the Earth to warm by an average of around 2.6 degrees Celsius or 4.7 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. President Trump has withdrawn the United States from the Paris Agreement, making it the only nation among nearly 200 to do so. He's also pulled the country out of the underlying United Nations Climate Treaty and a Nobel Prize winning group made up of the world's leading climate scientists. Senator Chuck Schumer of New York and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. Both Democrats said the EPA had abandoned its responsibility to protect public health and the environment. This shameful abdication, environmental, moral, and political failure will harm Americans' health, homes, and economic well-being, they said in the statement. It ignores scientific fact and common sense observations to serve big political donors. Senator Shirley Moore Capito, Republican of West Virginia, where coal law remains a key component of the economy, was one of the handful of lawmakers to publicly praise Mr. Trump's decision. His repeal will have a transformational impact on my home state of West Virginia, as these effects reverse the harmful Democratic tax on affordable gas-powered vehicles that West Virginians have endured for too long, Ms. Capito said in the statement. Note, she said Democrat instead of Democratic. Another way to attack the the other side of the aisle and not strive to work towards agreements, which is what we should be doing. To continue, President Trump, his 2024 campaign got a boost of as much as $450 million from the oil and gas industry, most of it through corruption, has worked to make it cheaper and easier to keep burning fossil fuels while throttling efforts to build cleaner energy sources such as wind and solar. Reversing the endangerment finding has been seen as the holy grail for those who deny the science of climate change. That's because if the repeal is upheld in court, it could also prevent future administrations from restoring regulations that curb greenhouse gases. Mr. Zeldin and other administration officials said that the endangerment finding has been a drag on the economy. They argued that requiring the EPA to tackle climate change harm consumer choice by limiting the types of automobiles available to purchase, which is completely nonsense. Some business groups supported the administration's actions, but others were silent or muted in their response. That's because trade groups that once opposed the endangerment finding, like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, in recent years acknowledged the scientific reality of climate change. John Bozzella, president of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, which represents most automakers, declined to say whether he supported the move. He said in a statement that the automobile emissions standards imposed by the Biden administration were, quote, extremely challenging for automakers to achieve the given current marketplace demand, unquote. Other industry officials said the EPA would move would hurt electric vehicle manufacturing, rescinding the endangerment finding, quote, pulls the rug out from companies that have invested in manufacturing next-gen vehicles across the United States. Quote, quote, Albert Gore, the director of the Zero Emission Transportation Association, a trade group, said in a statement. Quote, that this place takes place following a record year of global sales of these vehicles shows a clear disconnect between Washington and the market, end quote, Mr. Gore said. Several business trade groups told the EPA that they were concerned about the legal implications of the agency's proposal. They said they were worried that some states would enact stricter greenhouse gas policies in response, forcing companies to respond to a patchwork of laws in different parts of the country. Mike Summers, the president of the American Petroleum Institute, which represents oil and gas companies, said the industry wants to end the regulations that apply to automobiles, but that the government should continue to limit carbon dioxide as well as methane emissions from power plants and oil and gas wells. Most major oil and gas companies have already invested millions of dollars in pollution controls. One of the reasons why we wouldn't support that is because we do support the federal regulation of methane and we are focused on reducing our emissions in the industry, Mr. Summers said in a recent call with journalists. To drive the repeal. The drive to repeal the endangerment finding began well before President Trump was reelected at the White House. It was an objective in 2025, the conservative blueprint for overhauling the federal government and essentially turning it into what it is now, which is a complete dumpster fire. Although that is just my opinion. The endangerment finding has been abused by the EPA to justify regulations that do not comport with the Clean Air Act, said Thomas J. Pyle, president of the American Energy Alliance, a conservative research group that promotes fossil fuel energy. If Congress thinks the EPA should regulate CO2 as a pollutant, they should say it so affirmatively in law so that the EPA has a clear mandate. In discarding the endangerment finding, Mr. Zeldin is reversing positions he took as a member of Congress from Long Island from 2019 to 2023. During that time, he voted several times to address climate change, including a vote against an amendment to a spending bill that would have prohibited the EPA from applying the endangerment finding. He joined the Climate Solutions He even joined the Climate Solutions Caucus, a bipartisan group of House members, which just goes to show you how much of a hypocrite he is. In 2022, he ran unsuccessfully for governor of New York and a pledge to allow and accelerate national gas drilling, which would be a disastrous move. After becoming Trump's EPA administrator, Mr. Zeldin ridiculed climate change and said he hoped to, quote, drive a dagger through it by repealing the endangerment finding. Yeah, that's from the New York Times. So yeah, we're kind of screwed. Few things. One, this is disastrous for the entire world. Two, Donald Trump is an idiot. And three, the entire federal government are a bunch of idiots because they keep trying to do things that clearly don't work, and conservative policies never do. So we need to, I don't know, vote for Democrats, please. Otherwise, we are literally destroying this country. This country is being destroyed around us as we speak by a bunch of ignorant, bigoted, racist, homophobic idiots who genuinely have no idea what they are doing. Thanks for watching.